So you may be wondering what it's actually like to play an armoured tank destroyer on World of Tanks, and of course there aren't too many of them that actually have armour models that work effectively, but today's video looking at the T95 shows exactly that. Now, what do I mean by a tank destroyer that actually has armour? Well, you could look at something like a Jaeger. Yes, it has these really good armour that, you know, is statistically very good. But considering the fact that it has a giant lower plate, it has a cupola on the top, and if you load premium, you can pretty much go through the superstructure of the Jaeger, then yeah, the armour model doesn't work as well as you would have liked it to. However, the T95, the Tier 9 American tank destroyer that has recently got buffs to both its whole rotation speed and also the standard penetration on its 105mm gun, has also meant that now you can perform amazingly better. Now, I'm not saying that these buffs in particular made the tank super good. That comes down to the fact that the update 6.0 did realistically change the tank completely. Now you are a hell of a lot more accurate, and trust me, you want to be using the 155mm cannon that this gets. 700 alpha damage means that you can destroy enemies that come up against you. You're able to do that in 13 seconds, which is unbelievable, and considering the accuracy nerfs that came with one of the most recent updates, meaning that now you have plus 20%, minus 20% to your accuracy, makes the tank so much easier. It's very hard for opponents to hit your weak points reliably, being that big cupola on the top that can be penned by pretty much anyone that's going to be able to hit it, and even then sometimes it does actually bounce off, so you can actually theoretically bounce a few shots there. Of course, you have that very slim lower plate that is very difficult to be able to actually get hit in, so yeah, it doesn't really have too many frontal weak points, and of course if you get around the side then the armour doesn't tend to work that well, but then again every single tank in the game is exactly like that. So let's get into some gameplay. I'm going to show you two fantastic results within the T95. We're going to show you how to play it and of course how good it actually is. Some of them might be thinking, yeah, but it can only go 20 kilometers an hour forward, but that does not matter anymore. Let's have a look at the gameplay now. Now, the first gameplay is here on Vineyards. I was playing with one of my friends. They're playing in the Type 4 Heavy. Of course, that's got the recent buffs too with this update, meaning that it can deal that extra 200 alpha damage at tier 9, being able to do a total damage of 1300 if you pen with HE, and of course if you load the heat rounds that now have 330mm of penetration, you can do 700 consistently as well. So what exactly does the T95 do well? Well, that is basically being a kind of a walking or slowly walking tortoise of a tank, a doom turtle where you can just hold down the line. You are pretty much a defensive tank. You kind of need the opponents to kind of come at you and then you can really dish out the damage. Of course, you can't really push too quickly into opponents because you do only have 20 kilometers an hour maximum top speed. Of course, that's without the speed equipment that you could potentially put on this tank, but in my opinion, don't really want to be putting on the speed equipment because the DPM perks, that rapid loading from the crew commander and also advanced loader within the actual equipment slot make this tank's DPM even better, meaning that you can deal that 700 damage within 13 seconds every single time, and that's of course if you don't have your enhanced rations loaded at the same time. Now, what you see me doing here is getting into a position in like this to be able to try and feather a shot on the Object 279E. You'll see I've loaded premium, and that's just because the side of tanks like the Object 705A and the Object 279E's turrets aren't the easiest thing to go through, and I think with this gun you actually have 330mm of penetration with APCR, meaning that yeah, it's very rare that you're not going to be able to pen, and of course we put one round very clean into the Object 279E's side of the turret, dealing 728 damage, and trust me, we'll be dealing a hell of a lot more damage by the end of this game, and we pulled off a really nice result. So I was going after the Object 268 version 5 then. Unfortunately, we didn't actually manage to pen him because, of course, the turret armour of that tank got recently buffed as well. So, don't quite know what Wargaming were thinking by giving the tank that was supposed to be the weakly armoured version of a pretty decent gun, basically. The fact that it got a turret in the Object 268, that the Object 268, of course, doesn't get. then yeah, now they've given it a turret, and now it basically is a better version of the 268. However, it doesn't get the DPM that you might get in the 268, and that's kind of where the trade-off becomes, because you are more versatile in this version 5 comparatively. Now what you see is Andre the Giant has decided he's going to push up. None of our team have gone the right hand side, and the majority of their team have kind of pushed up into that hill on the northern part of the map, where you see our team trying to battle with them. And then of course we've gone for the southern part of the map, and the whole of the enemy team are pretty much sat around that kind of area. Of course there's a few tank destroyers sat in the kind of opposite hill to where we are on their side of the map, and we're just waiting now to be able to deal with the Andre the Giant. He makes a big misplay. If I was the Andre the Giant, I would be just sat there poking, keeping the opponent spotted, that would essentially be me, and then our team in the back that were undetected would be able to deal damage to whoever I was spotting. And what you see here me doing is seeing where the rounds are coming in blind, because of course if you can see where your opponents are going to be firing, then you can deal damage back to them, because of course they will be there. We spot the Carnarvon, who's moved up aggressively. That's because the view range of the T95 is pretty good, especially if you consider the basically the camo factor that you can get in a tank like the T95 down to about 240 meters, because I've got advanced concealment and I have boosted up the view range with advanced optics, running that with of course the extra gun DPM. Now you see that we only track someone there, which is unfortunate. You saw that the tree went down. It would have been nice to get a fully penetrating shot on a blind tank. However, that is not the case, and now we're just kind of waiting. Maybe the Carnarvon would have moved up and I didn't spot him. We're just kind of, that's where we were aiming. Now that we basically can't spot anyone over the southern part of the map, or you see that there is a heavy now detected over there, it's time to try and get some shots onto someone to be able to, so that our team can then move up and do something else. Now what you noticed here is I've fired pretty much exclusively APCR rounds in this game, which have meant that I've only got one left. So if it comes to the end of the game and we really do need the actual penetration, of course we don't need it against things like tank destroyers that we're going to be firing at. But yeah, it's kind of one of those things where I should have really swapped back to the standard ammunition, because I believe you get 286mm of penetration on the standard rounds of the 155. Now we put one into the T28 prop. Unfortunately we low roll quite significantly actually, meaning that we don't actually manage to get the finishing hit on him. We do, however, I've just looked, we have 278mm as standard penetration, which, yes, is absolutely fine for coming up against the majority of tanks that you will do in the T95. You've got 3.28 rate of fire rounds a minute, which is, yeah, you're going to be dealing about 2,400 DPM with this thing. Of course, that's without actually putting on any of the perks to boost that up. So it's looking pretty good for the T95 right now, especially if the team on the enemy team are pushing up super aggressively trying to get damage on you. You can certainly dish out the damage back to them, and of course they have a very hard time dealing with the frontal armor of the T95, as you'll see towards the later half of this replay, and that is where this T95 becomes unbelievable. You see that here we go. This is where the barrage of just rounds coming in from all over the place start to happen within this game. The M48A5, well, we're going to go and try and get a round into him. 693 damage, which is okay. One kind of problem with this tank, it only gets 5 degrees of gun depression, but because it's so well armoured on the front, you can actually just push over hills a lot of the time to be able to deal that damage, irrelevant of whether or not you're going to get basically anyone coming after you. Of course, don't be pulling out on things like Jaegers, because that's never going to work properly. But when it comes to the medium tanks and the maybe lower tier tank destroyers on the enemy team, then yeah, we don't really have much of a problem frontally. It's just if they manage to get round the side of us that it becomes a problem in the T95. Now, it doesn't become too much of a problem, however, because we actually have really decent traverse speed now. If you manage to put on the perks that increase your traverse speed, which I would recommend in something like the T95 and the whole tank destroyer line really, for the Americans, in terms of the T110E3 and also the T28 standard tank, which I actually enjoyed. Trust me, after update 6.0, the T28 tank destroyer at tier 8 is not actually as bad as you think. The DPM on it is really nice. I'm not going to say it's the best tank in the game because it certainly isn't that, but yeah, it definitely surprised me when I played that tank, considering a lot of people were saying it is awful and it's the worst thing that they've played. For me, I found it quite enjoyable. Now, as far as this game's going, it's a little bit stale, isn't it? But we have managed to pick up 5,000 damage in total, 1,500 blocked and 161 assistance damage is not anything to kind of sniff at. We're definitely pushing out the damage very quickly, and we're going to try and push onto this KV4. Of course, you'll see me trying to get a shot on him here, and this is where the T95 becomes so fun. We do only track him, which is a little bit unfortunate, and you see me angling towards the opponents there on the right. We know that there's a tank destroyer somewhere back there. We haven't actually checked to see what it is, but I believe it was a Scorpion G, if I was right. Now this is where we should have aimed properly at the KV4, which got recent buffs, of course, to its frontal armour. However, the T95E6 on our team decided to take him out. Now this is a bit worrying for the T95, of course, having medium tanks pushing aggressively towards you in a tank that literally traverses 16 degrees a second or 18 degrees a second with its recent buffs, meaning that, yeah, it's going to be a little bit difficult to be able to traverse if they decide to just YOLO me and get around the side. We do manage to spot both the medium tank and the heavy tank back there, who are kind of trying to get some shots on us. Of course, we bounce another round there. The Centurion Action X is firing. We see that there was a round coming right back from the back of the map, and you'll see me, what I'm doing now is rearranging my tank to be able to come up on the less steep version of the hill, so I don't have to go right up and expose the lower part of my tank, which is kind of a weak point, and you might see that the Action X actually fired at the lower part of my tank to be able to deal that damage. Now the Action X no longer has that shot, and you see what I did there. Right before the Action X fired, as I know the kind of reload that will have, I moved so that I was angling sideways, so it made it a little bit more difficult for him to be able to hit us. Scorpion G is now going to try and get a shot onto us before he exits the game, and of course he will probably do that, and he does manage to pen, which is unfortunate, but you know, we'll take that result anyway. 6,454 damage in the T95, holding back pretty much half of the enemy team between two of us in the Type 4 Heavy, as Ted playing in that, and then of course myself in the T95. We blocked 3,500 damage in a Tier 9 tank destroyer in a Tier 10 game where we were coming up against people firing the premium ammunition, which of course, as many of you know, is the bane of anyone's existence if you play a heavily armoured tank. Of course, we do have 2 marks. We got 1,738 base experience there, 723 assistance damage, bringing the grand total up to 7,100. Ace Tanker, we obviously got the Bruiser medal, and we had a pretty good performance between us all as a platoon, and of course we really did impact the game fairly well to be able to come out with the win in such a game like that. Now, moving on into the second gameplay, we're going to feature what it can do in another kind of matchup where you're coming into those high-tiered Tier 10 games, and hopefully we'll get a good result in that as well. Now, Kalbang, the new map, or I should say new, it's kind of fairly old now, it's a couple months now since this map came into the game, but it is one of those new larger maps that console got, and it is quite a... it's a difficult map for those really slow tanks like myself, and it's all about positioning, getting yourself into the right kind of position to be able to impact the game later on in the game. So you always have to think in your slower, heavily armoured tanks, I need to be here by the time that the enemy move up to this position in order for me to actually be able to get either more damage or actually make an impact in the game. You never want to be that slow heavy tank that's waited too long to push up, and then at the end of the game when there's 5 tanks left alive on the enemy team, that you're just sat there doing absolutely nothing because you have no chance of getting forward to be able to deal any more damage onto the opponent. So that is something that heavily tanked players will know all about if you don't move early enough on into the game, as well as if you move too early in the game. Yeah, it's kind of finding that balance within these tanks, and I'm sure many of you will know that, and I am just kind of highlighting the fact that that is definitely a problem that many of you will see. As you see Ted there trying to push me or just block me from overtaking him because, yeah, being overtaken by a T95 is not particularly the most enjoyable thing, especially when you're playing in something like the Type 4 Heavy. Yeah, recent buffs made the tank fairly decent, and I'm saying that it's not particularly OP because not as much as the Type 5 Heavy that I think has gone too far in one direction. No pun to the group One Direction, but yeah, it's certainly not something I enjoy whatsoever. Having all of these tanks getting buffed, I think the high alpha damage guns that are just appearing more and more within the game are just making the game feel a little more, I don't know, just it's not so enjoyable. When every single thing has 850 alpha damage or higher, and when everything just gets more armor and just buffed everywhere. I think maybe just taking a few more buffs and nerfs, because tanks don't tend to get nerfed in World of Tanks console, that's for sure. And we've picked up 732 damage on the Object 268 version 5, which is by no means awful, but there doesn't seem to be too many players coming over onto this right hand side of where we're at now, so yeah, I kind of got to wait and see what happens. Now what you see there is the artillery is firing blind. The E4 wasn't spotted, I wasn't spotted, and I can assure you that Ted over there wasn't spotted either, but he does get hit. I think the M103 is now pushing up, but what we do aim for is that lower right hand track to be able to try and get some spotting damage, some assistance damage, sorry. Unfortunately we don't manage to do that, but at least we gave our team the opportunity, and we're just going to wait now until we can actually get a damaging shot onto them. Now what you'll notice in just a second is that Ted's actually been penned by the artillery, making him feel rather inadequate right now, as we put a nice round into the AMX 13105, and the T100 LT now decides to move up. The E4 over there is not feeling too good, and of course Ted there sat with being penned by the artillery is certainly feeling the brunt of the unluckiness within the game. Of course the M53-55 can deal 1,750, I think it is, with HE, or 1,500 with AP. Not entirely sure if that's correct, but I believe it's about that kind of region. And what we do now is move slightly forward. I'm thinking if we can get into a position where we can use these bamboo, which do, trust me, act as camouflage, and trust me, they are kind of OP. Bamboo is actually OP in the game because there's so many of the shoots which technically act as one bush per one, and yeah, you can basically become undetectable at ridiculous ranges. As you'll see it later on in the game, I think we actually don't spot someone and we're so close. I'm not entirely sure if it was this game or a previous one, but trust me, some of the bamboo makes your camo unbelievably OP. Now we go for a shot there, and because that is where typically enemy tanks stay, because they're waiting to see if our team gets spotted up here, yeah, we managed to get a critical hit. Now, do we get a fully penetrating shot on the next round that we fire? No, it must have moved. It must be somewhere else. But we're not going to just stop there. We're going to keep firing, keep trying to get that damage, because, you know, if you don't fire a shot and you don't get any damage, it doesn't really matter. But if you're not firing and you do actually manage to get a damaging shot like we did there on the medium tank who was trying to get away, then yes, absolutely so much fun. We picked up another bit of damage there. The artillery, who obviously actually has a brain for once, decided to actually blind fire us because he must have been pre-aiming over here, waiting to see a shot go out, and of course we get hit for it, which is a little bit annoying, and considering he missed me for, what's that, 550 damage, it's a little bit concerning how that is still in the game. But you know, of course, you guys can make up your own opinions. I think Wargaming are hopefully trying to push towards getting maybe some sort of artillery nerf. Please, Wargaming, please do something like that. I'm not entirely sure if they're ever going to do that. Of course, in the news articles they spoke about artillery nerfs, and I would 100% want to see the one-shot mechanic from artillery being completely taken away. Of course, if you want to take a look at some of the shots that artilleries can hit, then yesterday's video you can see all about that and all about the one-shot mechanics that were in the game previously to update 6.0. So we've got a lot of information, or not information, but a lot of gameplay clips of pre-update 6.0, and I'm sure many of you veteran players, if you're watching this video and you haven't already quit World of Tanks console, then yeah, you'll be able to see what it was previously like and hopefully bring back a bit of nostalgia in World of Tanks, because yeah, I'm kind of miss it looking back at some of the clips that I was hitting with the FV 4005 before the Hesh round nerf, where yeah, it actually got balanced for once, and the balancing was actually fairly decent. I think removing that 1850 alpha, bringing it down to a more competitive 1450. Yeah, certainly if you do get pen with Hesh, it is annoying. 1450 is horrible, but it doesn't one-shot you like it used to if you were 2 tiers below, unless you do really have quite low hit points. Of course, light tanks can still get one-shot by the FV 4005, but at least some of the mediums and the heavy tanks that you'll be coming up against can't just get deleted from the game like they used to. Now, we've picked up 2,912 damage, which is not awful, but what we do notice is that there is a T110E4 that's kind of over here, and we're trying to get the damage off of him to try and get him out of the game so that we can then push, or we can defend from the right-hand side where Ted is sitting. What you'll notice here is that the hitboxes are killing me. We are trying to push forward to get the damage on that guy. Of course, it's a little bit difficult because we can't see, and given the fact that the T110E4's cupola got actually buffed with the recent update, meaning that the tank's frontal weak points are pretty much the same as the E3. Well, I say they're the same, they're not exactly the same, because you can still pen the cupola, and it's probably a little bit weaker than the T110E3. It's still nowhere near as competitive, or when you play up against it, it's way more competitive even than it used to be. Certainly it's become one of the more meta tank destroyers within the game, if not probably the best tier 10 tank destroyer that you can actually play right now, because the armor works again, and of course you have that 850 alpha damage to be dishing out to your opponents very, very consistently. It is definitely now well over power creeped the T110E3, which is of course its direct competitor from the American tank line. Yeah, I would 100% rather have the T110E4, which I will hopefully be doing some videos on fairly soon, as I just need to get that silver to be able to purchase the tank and give it a go in the game. Now, getting back off of the topic of all of these buffs that Wargaming have been doing to the game and all of the updates and the previous updates, we now need to push. We need to get forward and basically be super aggressive to try and get rid of this flank before the T110E4 decides to come from behind me. Whether it's him or someone else, we don't entirely know yet, and we're going to have to wait and see how it goes. Of course, we are pushing up now, but there is a heavy tank behind us. We don't know what it is. Oh dear, it's an FV215B that actually has super nice DPM for a tier 10 heavy, who's now pushing us. He doesn't aim correctly. He should have aimed for the rear part of the tank, which is unfortunate for him, but what we do now is aim for that side of the tank to be able to deal that 900 or 800 damage to the FV215B, who gets taken out by our E4, and it's time to turn around in this pretty clutch situation now. We are definitely in a sausage sandwich, and trust me, you don't like sausage sandwiches if you're playing in the T95. Now, the T110E4 doesn't aim properly. We try and aim at the Type 5 heavy, but we don't manage to do any damage to him because, yes, that weak point did get buffed, I believe, in the most recent update. So no longer is it just an auto pen with standard. So we load a premium round to be able to deal the damage. We're getting stuck on that E4 or no, E100 even. My apologies. But yeah. Then we finish him off with a premium round, which of course has more than enough penetration to pretty much go through the front of any of the tier 10 heavy tanks, especially things like the Type 4 and the Type 5. They don't really have armor when you load premium in tank destroyers at tier 10. A little bit worried now because the gorilla was over this side. We don't know where he is currently, but we're going to have to wait and see as to whether our team can spot him. We've picked up a very nice game, don't get me wrong. 7,000 combined in the T95 does not happen all of the time. You do need to rely on the opponent's team pushing you and you being able to actually bounce a few shots, which of course we've done in this game. 2,100 block damage is very, very nice, but we are on a one-shot now for a tank destroyer to be able to one-shot us now out of the game. Now we're taking it a little bit slow. We don't really necessarily need to anymore because the gorilla's been spotted. He's only on 100 health, and yeah, we're going to push up now to try and get that final shot on the gorilla to win the game. And yeah, I'm sure that in the 5 versus 1 we're not going to lose to a gorilla on 183 hit points. I'm sure that the artillery will be able to take him out of the game if anyone else doesn't actually manage to do it anyway. Gorilla there, we spot him. I believe it was us that spotted him anyway, because we did have the ability to see him, his outline at least. Whether or not we get any assistance damage if he manages to get taken out. But here you go. This is where the T95 struggles, and that is anywhere with hills. Trust me, if you're playing Westfield trying to get up onto the top of the hill, you're not going to be having fun. Let's look at the speed now. Down to 9 kilometers an hour. 8. Yeah, there we go. Object 268 version 5 takes out the gorilla, and of course we managed to come top of the game, dealing a fairly hefty amount of assistance and actual damage within the T95. And of course I hope that this really did show you what the T95 is like right now. I feel like previously, before update 6.0, the increases to accuracy, that sort of thing, the DPM buffs that you can now get on the tank, you can certainly have some fun games in this. And it is certainly a competitive tier 9 tank destroyer in the game right now, and that probably hasn't been said for a T95 in quite a long time. Definitely a tank I would recommend to some of you players interested in playing that heavy kind of tank destroyer role, where you can be aggressive, but you also have to be aggressive early on and predict where you need to be at the end of the game to be able to deal that last bit of damage and improve in your marks of excellence, or however much damage you want to hopefully get and achieve in something like this. Of course, both games, 7,000 combined damage in both of them, which means that in 2 games we essentially got 14,000 total damage, all combined into one. Yeah, really good results in these gameplay. Hopefully you did enjoy the video. If you want to check out the 268 version 5 and the 268, then I did do a previous video looking at both of them, comparing them, giving my opinion on them. And yeah, if you want to take a look at some of that gameplay, we've got 2 replays on there as well for you to be able to have a look at. So there you go. That's some gameplay to have a look at now on screen. Of course, thank you for watching, and thank you very much to all of the channel members for supporting the channel a little bit extra. I hope to see you in the next video. Goodbye.